As the 2020 presidential race comes down to the wire, the outcome may hinge on a few key states, which could swing either red or blue. Coming up, we'll check in with Arizona.
There's a good chance that it is probably turning a little purple.
We'll get perspective from North Carolina.
We are a more Republican state than we were 40 years ago, but less conservative.
And we'll hear from a bellwether in presidential politics, Ohio.
When you look at the numbers in Ohio, we have already narrowed that gap.
This is a special edition of Balance of Power's look at election 2020. I'm David Westin. Today, we look at three critical swing states that could help decide who occupies the Oval Office in next January. We start with Arizona, a once solidly Republican state that is now more of a toss-up. Arizona has 11 electoral votes, and polls show a tight race as former Vice President Joe Biden hopes to become the first Democrat to win the Grand Canyon state since Bill Clinton did back in 1996. For an overview, we spoke to Bloomberg contributor Rick Davis, who ran the 2008 presidential campaign of the late Arizona Senator John McCain.
4 years ago in 2016, it was not a swing state. So it's one of those that have moved into the swing column primarily because it changes both demographically in the state, but also ideologically. Demographically, I think, the increase in Hispanic population have moved it a little bit closer to the Democratic column. Hispanics make up almost a third of the voting population now. And ideologically, in 2016, Trump won white suburban voters in Maricopa County, the largest county in the state, what really decides the outcome in states. And in 2018, those same suburban voters fled the Republican Party, causing Martha McSally, running for election to the Senate, to lose a Republican. So it's going to be an interesting ride there, but it's definitely a swing state this year.
So as you say, Maricopa County, as I understand it, you know better than I, really determines the state largely. It's a really big county and a large portion of the voting populace. What has changed 2016 to 2018? Has the demographic nature of Maricopa counties changed? Is it more heterogeneous than it was before? Is it they've changed their attitude toward things like immigration?
Well, Maricopa has been changing for a long time. It is one of those one of those counties. It's the city of Phoenix is in Maricopa County that has grown at an enormous rate. It's been one of the top 5 fastest growing counties in the United States for the last 15 years, and is one of the top 5 of the largest counties in America. So it is a complex political beast. I would say what is starting to change is the Republican lock in the suburbs. In the past, we've been able to win the state by winning Maricopa. And if we are not able to hold on to especially white women suburban voters in Maricopa County, we can't win the election.
For a perspective on what it takes to win statewide office in Arizona, we spoke to someone who's done it, former Republican Governor Jan Brewer. She admits the state is changing, but she hopes it hangs on to its conservative roots.
There's a good chance that it is probably turning a little purple here in Arizona, which is very distressful to us Republicans. But the bottom line is that we've had a lot of people moving in out of California and other places coming to the great state of Arizona. So our demographics have really changed. I think that we have to take that all into consideration when we're out there spreading our message about conservatism, because, Arizona's always been a very conservative state. So I think that it probably will remain conservative. I am hopeful of that, but we've got big races on our hands. And I know that the election for the president is tightening, and for our United States Senate, that race is very frightful. And we've got to really get out there and spread our message.
For a Democratic perspective on the issues that matter to Arizonans, we spoke to Representative Tom O'Halloran, a Democrat who represents the 1st District, which includes much of the eastern part of the state and Flagstaff.
This state's going to be looking at a lot what other states are going to look at, the economy, the COVID issues, issues related to natural resources because of the size of the state and the amount of, in my district, I have all or parts of 6 national forests and the Grand Canyon and other forested areas. And we're going to be looking at that. Water is a big issue in the southwestern United States. and healthcare. It's going to be a race that I think is trending towards the same direction it did in 2018, but we still have a long ways to go.
This election year, it won't just be about getting people to come out and vote for a given candidate. Much may also turn on whose votes get counted and how. We spoke to Secretary of State Katie Hobbs to find out how Arizona will run its elections in a year when a pandemic is likely to drive record levels of absentee ballots.
We are in really good shape in terms of vote by mail. In 2018, 78% of our voters voted that way. And so in terms of having the processes in place, the infrastructure, and making sure that that vote by mail is very secure in Arizona, we are there and ready to and able to handle the increases that we expect for this election.
Could you give us a sense at this point, Madam Secretary, of how many requests there have been filed so far for mail-in ballots? Does it give you any indication whether it's going to be a larger number that you have to end up counting or not?
Well, prior to this election, we had 75% of our voters on the permanent early voter list, but voters can also request a one-time early ballot. So we don't ever know until, really close to the election how many ballots are actually going out in the mail. Voters can request that up until October 23rd. So we expect an increase. We saw 88% of voters vote early in the primary election that was just held, and that's the amount that we're gearing up for in this election.
So maybe October 23rd, we'll have a little better sense of how many people have requested this. As I understand it, you can't start counting until Election Day. Is that right?
No, not in Arizona. The county recorders are immediately begin processing those ballots once they start receiving them back in the mail. They get mailed out on October 7th, and they can start receiving them right away. And they start processing them in terms of verifying the signature on the affidavit, the voter signature. That's how identity is verified. And then those ballots are separated from the envelope, ready to be processed and tabulated. And we can start tabulation 14 days before the election.
Arizona's had a little bit of history with voting. In fact, there was a Ninth Circuit decision, as I understand it, just this year about the Voting Rights Act, and some of the laws had been passed to sort of discourage, the court found at least, some people from voting. Is that going to make a difference in this election this year?
Well, that law that the Ninth Circuit overturned is still on the books. It's been appealed. The overturn has been appealed to the Supreme Court, and there's a stay right now. So we anticipate that law, which has been in effect for a couple elections now, will still be in effect, and so won't really impact. There's a couple other pending court decisions that we're waiting on to see how they might impact this year's election.
That was Arizona's Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, wrapping up our look at the swing state of Arizona. Up next, we head to another state that's seen massive population growth and a large influx of new business, making it one of the most contested states in the nation, North Carolina.
We are a purple state with a very slight tint to red.
This is Bloomberg. I'm David Westin. This is a special edition of Balance of Power, looking at three key swing states in this year's election. We turn now to North Carolina. The Tar Heel state has 15 electoral votes and was carried by President Trump in 2016. It's voted for a Democrat for president only one time in the last 10 elections. Polling averages put President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden nearly dead even. J. Michael Bitzer, politics professor at Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina, sets the stage.
We are a purple state with a very slight tint to red. We're center lean right, but it's all dependent upon who shows up. And what has happened here in North Carolina after 2008 and particularly 2010 is that North Carolinians have basically sorted themselves into the respective partisan camps. In 2004, George W. Bush won this state by 13 percentage points, and the Democratic governor who was running for re-election also won by 13 percentage points. That day of North Carolinians splitting their tickets has now shrunk to probably 3 to 5% of the electorate. Most North Carolinians have their minds made up going into November 3rd.
Longtime North Carolina members of Congress agree with that assessment. Here's the take from two members, Democrat David Price from the Triangle, which is Raleigh-Durham, and Republican Patrick McHenry from the Charlotte area.
We've usually referred to North Carolina as a center-right state, but I don't know. It looks center to me. Maybe that's the way to put it. We have a landmark Senate race where our candidate Cal Cunningham has steadily shown a small lead. Biden is showing a small lead over Trump. Our governor, who's also up for re-election, is showing a quite large lead over his opponent. And then the question also is, I guess, what about the special circumstances of this election? You know, we have shown in the past that Democrats can win North Carolina, like Barack Obama did in 2008. But usually it has tipped the other way. This time it looks like it it's just as close as it could be. But I think we're really living up to our swing state role, and our side's hopeful because there are a lot of hopeful signs.
North Carolina is a diverse state. We have 5 media markets fully contained within the state, 7 media markets total. It is a substantial and large geographic state and a substantial population. We have a lot of folks that have come in through the Northeast and the Midwest to come and work in the Triangle and in Charlotte, both with tech and pharmaceuticals in the Triangle and with banking in Charlotte. And as a result, we are a more Republican state than we were 40 years ago, but less conservative, more of a moderate state. So the tale of Raleigh and Charlotte that's different than the suburbs and exurbs of that, much less far western North Carolina and eastern North Carolina are far more conservative. And so it is a narrow run state politically. And we have very, very hard-fought elections to control the state legislature, the governorship, and re-elect Senator Tillis and the president. So it is quite a state, and it's going to be quite interesting and expensive over the coming days, that's for sure.
As for how they'll count the votes in North Carolina this year and when we'll know the results, here's Damon Circosta. He's chair of the State Board of Elections.
Well, so the good news in North Carolina is we start doing everything to authenticate your ballot if it's absentee vote by mail 5 weeks ahead of the election. So every week, Board of Elections members in the counties get together in a bipartisan fashion, make sure that all these ballots that are coming into us are authenticated and ready to go. We will then do everything to prepare them for tabulation and then tabulate them on election day. So in North Carolina on election day, you'll see the vast majority of votes already tabulated. What won't be tabulated is people who are sending in their absentee vote by mail late, any provisional votes, and those will come in over the corresponding days after the election. You have to remember, we do not call the election on election night. That's usually you folks in the media. What we do is we begin our process that then goes to county canvass, which is 10 days after the election, and then ultimately to us to certify in early December.
North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein is confident there will be minimal issues with the voting process.
We have very professional staffs at the county and state level. People can vote by mail. We were the first state in the country to send out absentee ballots. And in fact, we've had more than 200,000 ballots accepted, including mine. I'm pretty excited. And more than 1 million North Carolinians have already requested a mail-in ballot. But we also have 17 days of early voting, including 2 weekends and election day. So if people prefer to go in person, they can do that as well. They just need to know that it will be safe, it will be easy, and their vote will be secure.
Are you 100% certain that under your approach for fixing these ballots or curing these ballots, it will not lead to any voter fraud? Because that's what the President of the United States is worried about.
Yeah, the worries are 100% overblown. I am not worried, and I'll explain why. Look, a Republican, a U.S. federal court judge appointed by George W. Bush, President Bush, ordered the state to come up with a cure process because we've never had mail-in voting like we're seeing right now. It's only ever been a few percentage of the population that has done absentee mail-in voting. This time we're expecting 30 or 40% of the electorate to do it. And there's a few people, about 3 or 4 or 5%, who make a mistake. They don't sign the ballot in the right place, or the witness doesn't sign in the right place, or the witness doesn't include the address. And so this federal judge ordered the State Board of Elections to come up with a cure process. And that's all we have done, is to bring effect to this federal court order to make sure that when someone sends in a ballot and they made a mistake, that the State Board of Election or the County Board of Election reaches out to them and says, you made a mistake, will you cure it? And here's the form that you have to send back in to make that so.
North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein finishing our look at the key state of North Carolina. Up next, we head to Ohio, a state that has become the bellwether for picking presidents and is also bracing for scrutiny over its process at the polls.
We're recruiting poll workers. We're making sure that our boards of elections are ready for the record high volumes of absentee votes they're going to get.
This is Bloomberg. I'm David Westin. This is a special edition of Balance of Power, looking at 3 key swing states in this year's election. Finally, we turn to Ohio. The Buckeye State has 18 electoral votes and is perhaps the ultimate presidential bellwether, having voted for the winner in every single election since Lyndon Johnson's landslide back in 1964. Kyle Kondik, editor of Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center of Politics, wrote a book on Ohio's presidential politics and talked about why the suburbs of cities like Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus could be the key this year.
There's been a lot of reporting and indications from operatives on both sides that the president's numbers in suburban areas are just a lot weaker than they were 4 years ago, which again is something you hear about and see in polling in other states. So that's important for Biden. I also think that, Trump won the state by 8 points, so you got to make up a lot of ground to flip the state if you're Biden. And so I think it's also going to be important for Biden to at least not get blown out so badly in the Appalachian parts of Ohio, in the eastern part of the state. And I also am really curious to see what happens in the Youngstown area, which was kind of historically kind of blue-collar Democratic, and the president did very well there for a Republican. Can he do even better? Does he stay the same? Is there some erosion there? I think Biden needs there to be some erosion to make the math work statewide.
We spoke to 2 Ohio members of Congress who both represent parts of a major city and the suburbs. Democrat Joyce Beatty of Cleveland and Republican Steve Chabot of Cincinnati. Here are their thoughts on the state of the race.
When we look at what much of the polling is saying, what people are saying when they are voting early, because they want to make sure that we get a president who stands up and speaks up for the people. And of course, that's Joe Biden. When you look at the numbers in Ohio, we have already narrowed that gap. As a matter of fact, just a week ago, it was even money between Joe and President Trump. And now when you look at it, Joe Biden has done an incredible job of getting the message out and being about the people. And each day, something new comes out about this president that doesn't surprise many of us. But when we look at Ohio, when we look at my congressional district, many of the polls are telling us that Joe Biden is doing better than Hillary was doing at the same time in Ohio. So that's good for us. And we in Ohio, we're tired of Trump's endless tweets. We're tired of his uneven temper. We're tired of all of his fake news.
The president won the state last time. It's closer this time. I think he's going to carry the state. And it's a very important state. They say, as goes Ohio, goes the nation, and that's been true most of the time over the year. We're trying to get beyond the COVID. We're trying to defeat it. We want to get a vaccine as soon as possible. Our governor, Mike DeWine, has been very aggressive in doing what was necessary to get the COVID under control and to make sure people are healthy. We're opening the schools and businesses. We're trying to do it in as safe a manner as possible because we want the economy to get back roaring again and get people back to work. So we're optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but we've got a lot of work to do yet.
So one of the things that people who follow politics focus on are the suburbs. And let's talk about Cincinnati, a city you know well, having been born and grown up there. Talk about the suburbs and the president's appeal versus former Vice President Biden's appeal in the suburbs this time, because it's thought maybe it's moved a bit toward the Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Well, the pollsters seem to say that, but we haven't had the election yet, and I think on Election Day we'll know the truth. And my feeling is people are concerned. They're concerned whether they're in urban areas, whether they're in the suburbs or in more rural areas. And I think they're looking at both the candidates. They're looking at the debate the other night, to the extent it was a debate, and they're looking at the records. And I think both candidates need to get everything out there, let the public make that decision. They usually get it right, and I usually agree with the decision they make. We'll see this time. I'm focused on my race also. We have a tough race, as we always do. I have most of the city of Cincinnati, and for a Republican, that makes it a little tougher, but it's an honor to represent the people of my district, and I'm determined to do it to the best of my ability.
Ohio is trying to make it easier for residents to vote this year, offering both absentee and early voting options, as explained by Secretary of State Frank LaRose, who joined us from Columbus.
The law says you can wait as late as the Saturday before the election. That is a very bad idea. Effectively, we're telling voters do not wait past the 27th of October just to allow for the logistics. But really, there's no reason to wait. If you didn't get the form that we mailed you, you can print your own at voteohio.gov, or you can even go there and get instructions for how to make your own just using a plain blank piece of notebook paper. And so that's something that Ohioans should do right now. And then if you're going to mail in your ballot, don't delay either. We want you to get that back as soon as you can. Those are going to start going out October 6th. As soon as you get it, you should fill it out and mail it back to your county board of elections. And in Ohio, you can track your ballot by going to voteohio.gov and making sure that the board of elections has received it. Now, the deadline is Monday, November 2nd. As long as it's postmarked by Monday, November 2nd, it has 10 days to arrive at the Board of Elections. David, one other important deadline that I want to mention is the voter registration deadline. Ohio's Constitution says you got to be registered to vote 30 days before the election. That means this Monday, October 5th, is the final day to get registered to vote. I've got all the boards of elections in the state staying open late till 9 p.m. But of course, you can do it online at voteohio.gov, and it's more convenient than ever. Ohioans should check their registration and make sure it's up to date.
So you say 2 million so far possible mail-in ballots. When do you start counting them? How long will it take before we know what they are?
So the good news here in Ohio is that we can start to process them immediately. What that means is that once the Board of Elections receives it, they can cut it open, verify your identity, check your signature, flatten it out. And sometimes people take for granted they have to be flattened out so they can go through the scanner. And then as soon as the polls close at 7:30 on election night, we can begin tabulating them. And so really the first results that we start to get in Ohio are those results from the early and absentee votes. In some states, they can't even start cutting them open until Election Day. And so thankfully in Ohio, we'll be ahead of the curve on that.
So there's been a lot of litigation around the country. We've seen already. Some people say it's over 245 lawsuits filed already on this election. How are you doing in Ohio? Is there much contentiousness over this?
Unfortunately, it's become just something that we have to expect. Some of these come with maybe a certain partisan motivation behind them. That's unfortunate. Some of these lawsuits that people file just 5-6 weeks before a presidential election, of course, cause concern. Our lawyers are working hard on that, but I'm not getting distracted by any of that. Our eyes on the ball and the work that we have to do. We're recruiting poll workers. We're making sure that our boards of elections are ready for the record high volumes of absentee votes they're going to get, and we're getting accurate information out to Ohio voters. And so, as much as that legal process has to play itself out, that's not distracting us.
That does it for this special look at some of the key swing states in the 2020 presidential election. We'll have more coverage on Balance of Power weekdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, including a look at Florida, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I'm David Westin. This is Bloomberg.